Well, good morning, everybody, and welcome to Chatham House. I want to, as we begin, tell everybody that we are being joined today by people via live streaming, and we are in Chatham House, and today that means that everything that is said is on the record and is recorded. It is recorded by Chatham House, not by you, because recording by you is not part of today's agreement. So by all means, please do tweet using the hashtag #CHAfrica, but please do not broadcast without permission. Today is the fourth in a series of 6 events which Chatham House is hosting, which are called Next Generation Nigeria. These events happen, as you know, when Nigeria is in the run-up to some elections, and in which, as ever, there is increased attention on some of the interesting constitutional questions which Nigerians have been debating for some considerable time. Today, we are very honoured to have with us His Excellency Atiku Abubakar, the former Vice President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria from 1999 to 2007. He was a member of the People's Democratic Party, and during his tenure as Vice President, His Excellency Abubakar presided over the National Council on Privatisation, and in 1999 he helped launch the South Africa-Nigeria Binational Commission. From 1994 to 95, he was part of the National Constitutional Conference, which was set up to decide on a new constitution for Nigeria, which is of great relevance to the subject today. Former Vice President is now a businessman and philanthropist, and he's been a long-time advocate of true federalism. Those of us who are now debating our future with the European Union are very interested in the notion of true federalism. But he's talking about the need to restructure Nigeria, driven by the belief that political decentralization will help to deepen and strengthen democracy because it will promote accountability. Some of the big themes which are close to the hearts of Nigerians. This morning we are very pleased to welcome His Excellency Atiku Abubakar to talk to us this morning. Please.
Thank you very much, Baronius. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, I thank the Royal Institute of International Affairs for giving me this platform to speak to such a distinguished audience. I specifically want to thank Dr. Alex Vines for inviting me to give this address. I particularly want to thank Nigerian nationals who are present here today. Your love for Nigeria is evident in that you have left your regular pursuits to be here to interact with lovers of Nigeria on issues that, if implemented, will lead to the progress of Nigeria. Your presence really inspires me. Thank you very much for coming. To friends of Nigeria here present, I appreciate your friendship, and it is my strong desire that our collective wish to see Nigeria fulfill her potentials are realized in the not-too-distant future. I am a widely traveled man, and everywhere I visit around the world, there is agreement that Nigeria has the potential to make that leap. Sorry, please.
Can I just take this opportunity to say that anybody else whose mobile phone goes off will be in deep trouble?
Can you?
I think we've got a technical. We got a technical issue here.
Yeah, there was some interference.
Okay. That's the thing about technology.
I said I am a widely traveled man, and everywhere I visit around the world, there is agreement that Nigeria has the potential to make leap from the third to the first world. And it is not that we have not made progress. After all, within a decade, we were able to move from being the third largest economy in Africa to being the largest by one. Yet there is still that consensus that we are not meeting up with our potential, and all things considered, that verdict is true. The question becomes, why is Nigeria not living up to the promise of our potentials? More specifically, why are we saddled with a heavy and almost unsustainable debt burden 12 years after President Olusegun Obasanjo and I provided the leadership that paid off Nigeria's entire foreign debt of $32 billion in one fell swoop? After paying off a monumental debt accumulated by previous government, then President Olusegun Obasanjo on 22nd of April said, Nigeria will not owe any kobo. Today, almost 12 years, Nigeria is owing everybody one kobo. What happened in the intervening years that the dream of our administration What happened in the intervening years to turn the dream that our administration had into this present reality, where Nigeria now owes double what we paid off in 2006? It's an irony. In talking about the importance of strengthening states' economic management systems, we must identify the structural defects in Nigeria's federal structure that prevents all levels of the Nigerian government, federal, states, and local governments from operating at optimal levels. After 19 years of uninterrupted democracy in the Fourth Republic, it is now an indisputable fact that today's Nigerian states essentially have been reduced to parastatals of the federal government and are addicted to the monthly allocation they receive from Abuja. There is nothing as addictive as states that are dependent on their monthly share of revenue from crude oil sales, and the only way to get them to manage their economies in an economically viable way is to cure them that addiction. Nigeria needs to be restructured. We must commit to a new development agenda with focus on wealth creation by the federating units rather than wealth distribution from Abuja to state and local government capitals. We must undertake a far-reaching economic reforms to attract private resources, including financial, and build bigger, stronger, and more subnational economies. We must expand the frontier of private sector activity beyond the realm of the oil sector and build a new Nigeria without oil. If oil could save a nation, then surely it would have saved Venezuela, the nation with the largest proven reserves of oil in the world. But you and I know that what is up with Venezuela is if oil has not saved her, it will not save Nigeria. If we want to help states strengthen their economies, we must come out with creative ways to encourage them to look inwards rather than outwards. Before we outline the steps we will take to support the states, we remind ourselves how we got there first. And I want you to listen. First of all, we have promoted, tolerated, and indeed celebrated a defective political structure. The federalism we practice is not smart. We politicize the creation of states and local governments over the years. States and local governments became too weak to meet their constitutional responsibilities. And consequently, the federal government emasculated them and took away those responsibilities which belong to them. Many of the states are small, subsistence economies with very limited capacity to sustain growth and leave their citizens out of poverty. It is therefore very attractive for these states and local governments to become addicted to revenues from federation accounts and to care less about their internal revenue opportunities. As a result, combined internally generated revenue from all the 36 states came up to less than 1% of Nigeria's nominal GDP and less than 12% of their 2016 budgets. Internally generated revenue is far less than what the states require to run their administrations. And many state and local governments survive by consuming more resources than they can generate internally, thanks to the generous handouts from the Federation accounts. Now, we allowed, that's the second reason, we allowed crude oil to crowd out the non-oil sectors which were Nigeria's lifeline in the 1960s and 70s, and celebrated the windfall from oil exports, which resulted in a steep rise in the volume of funds allocated to all tiers of government in the Federation. We preferred to survive on rent than on hard productive efforts. We were too drunk to remember to build a revenue buffer for the proverbial rainy day. There has been no effective revenue stabilization program and effective strategic planning to cushion the effect of falls in the price of crude oil. Number three, we lived on another structural fault line for too long and pretended all was well. The fault line, the Nigerian economy remains fragile and vulnerable to the vagaries of the global oil market, making the fiscal position of the national and subnational economies become precarious. However, this faulty economic structure has always been shielded by increased revenues from crude oil sales. Its deficiency is only exposed when global oil prices collapse, with impact on investments, consumption, and growth. Now, the big question, what can we do to help the federating units strengthen their economies? This is one of the reasons why we are here. One, there is no alternative to a policy which promotes the growth and diversification of the subnational economies. Number one, it must be achieved. How much revenue they generate locally from taxes and fees depends on the size and structure of their economies. The bigger and more diversified, the better. The federal government will create a business-friendly macroeconomic environment through the pursuit of appropriate monetary exchange rate policies to leverage private sector investments, especially in agriculture, to promote economic diversification. Indeed, achieving diversification is central to our economic development strategy. Let us begin to visualize Nigeria without oil, or one, not predominantly dependent on hydrocarbon. Two, our economic policies will be coherent, consistent, and therefore more predictable by the business community. Nothing could be more threatening to investment flows than an environment that is full of policy flip-flops. Three, we will ensure spatially balanced investment through a carefully designed incentive regime in order to provide more opportunities in the poorer and less endowed federating units. Number four, the subnational economies will be assisted in reforming their economic management institutions, including the revenue-generating agencies, which are seen by many as failed and ineffectually managed institutions within state service. They need to be reformed and strengthened to make them the reform agencies will be expected to improve taxpayer compliance, develop potentials of non-tax revenue sources, and block all leakages associated with tax administration. Beyond institutional and administrative reforms to improve operational efficiency of the revenue agencies, the federating units will be challenged to double their efforts in rebuilding the fiscal social contract by enhancing service delivery in key areas such as health, education, water supply, and infrastructural development. Only these would change the predominant perception that government revenues are diverted to the private bank of accounts of politicians, public officials, and their cronies. Number 6, and it is for the purpose of making states lose their addiction to federal allocation to make them look inwards and return to the healthy competition of 1957 to 1966, when Nigeria practiced her unique brand of true federalism known as regionalism, that I suggest the introduction of matching grants to states that have succeeded in increasing their internally generated revenue. My idea for the introduction of matching grants to be taken from the revenue accruable to the federal government for the purpose of matching the internally generated revenue of states in order to encourage states to become self-reliant. If I have my way, the federal government will match states IGR up to $250 million per state. Even this, thank you. Even with this policy, the federal government will continue to offer support in the form of intervention programs for states that rank below the average development index until such a time as they are able to become self-sufficient and sustaining. In furtherance of strengthening their economic management systems, another policy I would recommend to Nigerian states is to follow the example of President Obasanjo and I laid between 1999 and 2007, when we privatized and liberalized many aspects of the Nigerian economy. It had the almost immediate effect of reducing our wage bill and increasing services, capacity, and jobs in the private sector. By privatizing those state government-owned public enterprises that gulp huge sums by way of recurrent expenditure, yet give little returns by way of return on investment, state governments can free more of their revenue from recurrent and devote it to capital expenditure. Number 8, we will promote and insist on fiscal efficiency at the federal level to lead other tiers of government by example. The states will be challenged to adopt sound fiscal management strategy so as to reduce wasteful spending. Many view government spending as wasteful, imprudent, and lacking in priorities. Typically, recurrent costs constitute between 60% and 72% of state and local governments. As I said in a recent interview, if I had the opportunity, I would disrupt Nigeria's budgeting process completely. We would have a budget heavy on capital expenditure. If I recall, I think in 2011, when I was making a point to the business community in Lagos, I said, why can't we not think of using all our income from oil to infrastructural development and then use our internally generated revenue to fund our recurrent expenditure? And the only reason why that was opposed was because the bureaucracy, which consumes most of the money, was opposed to it, and therefore would not support the political leadership to achieve that objective. And in any case, I think the leadership was also not ready. We would have a budget heavy on capital expenditure. Roads will be built in every state. Mass housing schemes will pop up in every local government area. Railways will be extended to every state capital. Rivers would be dredged to open up the hinterlands of the north. Licenses would be given to state governments to begin immediate exploitation of resources in their jurisdictions. While this is happening on a macro level in the federal government, I would create the enabling environment for this to be done on a micro level in the states. When citizens are working, especially in construction and the service sector, the economy benefits because they pay more taxes. They utilize their increased purchasing power in buying goods and services, which improves value-added tax revenue and helps the private sector. Here again, I once advocated for the creation of enough jobs to challenge every employer of labor in our country, the industrialists, the businessmen. We sit down with them. How many jobs can you create? 10,000, 5,000? We will give you a tax rebate. Somebody said, well, if you give them a tax rebate, you are losing revenue. I said, well, but if they employ 10,000 people, I will also be getting income tax from the 10,000 people. I mean, it is business. Nowadays, if you don't know business, don't go into governance. The multiplier effects are almost limitless. I'm not talking about what can happen. I'm talking about what is currently happening in Rwanda. According to the International Monetary Fund, Rwanda's economy is expected to grow this year by 7.2%. This is an economy that already grew by 6.1% in 2007 last year. Their growth is being driven by the services sector, construction, and tourism. No oil. In my private capacity, I'm already doing this. There has not been a year in the last 20 years that I have not set up a new enterprise to employ Nigerians. The latest being that we brought the Chicken Cottage franchise to Nigeria, which will be creating direct and indirect jobs all across the country a few months ago. If states are to strengthen their economic management system, the Debt Management Office, which our administration set up in the year 2000, to centrally coordinate the management of Nigeria's debt, both domestic and foreign, must be given more independence than it already has. The head of the DMO must be a person with proven ability to say no to powerful persons. Otherwise, the states will keep on borrowing at an unsustainable rate, as we see in today's Nigeria. One very example of a state that did not borrow and was paying is Anambra State in our country. In her just released book, Fighting Corruption is Dangerous, the story behind the headlines, Dr. Mrs. Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala, former managing director of the World Bank and two-time Nigerian Minister of Finance and coordinator of the economy, who served during my time in office, revealed that she almost got beaten up by a particular governor at a meeting of the National Economic Council because she would not approve his request to take out more foreign loans for his already over-indebted state. There are already statutory parameters in place before the Debt Management Office could approve foreign loans to states. But I would want such parameters strengthened such that Nigerian governors who are close to the president will not use that relationship to get the Ministry of Finance and DMO to approve wasteful and necessary loans that in many cases are squandered on white elephant projects. There are states in Nigeria who are unable to pay workers' salaries, so many of them nowadays, yet have taken out huge foreign loans to build stadia and secretariats, projects that would not improve their financial position. We have seen in recent years that both Fitch and Standard & Poor's have downgraded Nigeria just as the Egmont Group has suspended us. As one who worked very hard along with President Olusegun Obasanjo between 1999 and 2007 to bring Nigeria back from the brink and pay off our entire foreign debt, these negative indices really bother me. It is also imperative that our foreign reserves and revenue buffers are boosted to insulate the economy against adverse shocks and to strengthen fiscal capacity. We will streamline the operations of the Sovereign Wealth Fund, the excess crude account, and the stabilization account, which is currently embedded in the revenue allocation formula for more effective stabilization outcomes. Unless these stabilization vehicles are reshaped, Nigeria will continue to be subject to vagaries of the world oil market. Let me end by providing more detail on restructuring, even at the risk of me repeating myself. Restructuring Nigeria is no longer an option, it is a necessity. This is why I said in February to Nigeria's elite that restructuring will not cheat you, it will free you. Some of them are sitting here. Restructuring will foster the spirit of cooperation and consensus in a nation of diverse ethnic groups, cultures, and religions. It is desirable. In fact, you may even say it is required to establish, nurture, and sustain a strong and effective democratic government. We must also remind ourselves that restructuring is not a new or strange phenomenon. A number of developing economies have had cause to restructure their economies for greater efficiency or to correct imbalances or to reorientate them towards, for example, more open and market-oriented systems with greater reliance on the private sector as engine of growth. Even the United Kingdom is restructuring, as the Baroness has said here, its political and economic system to enable a better union among its component parts. Businesses restructure for better performance. Even families do. Faced with the reality of non-performance, Nigerians have clamored for the restructuring of the economy and the polity towards a more diversified structure. Similarly, in line with current global realities, citizens have come to appreciate that the old economic model built on public sector supremacy is no longer a viable, sustainable option. They have therefore called for a reorientation of the economy to leverage resources from the private sector and stimulate growth and development. To make this, that is, economic restructuring happen, will require appropriate political intervention. In particular, it will require that we establish and sustain a model of governance which would nurture a spirit of participation and consensus on key national issues and accommodate all the diverse segments of the society. In other words, if we accept the wisdom behind calls for restructuring of the economy, we must be ready to build a foundation for its success. We must, in other words, restructure the polity as well. Nigeria has operated for too long a faulty system of federalism, especially under military governments. True federalism ensures that a strong federal government guarantees national unity while allowing various parts of the country or the federating units to set their own priorities. As a consequence, the federal government appropriates, along with these responsibilities, huge resources. For example, in the allocation of revenue from the federation account, the federal government is unduly favored at the expense of the states and local governments. Out of every 1 naira in the federation account, 56 kobo will go to the federal government and 4 other special accounts which it manages. This is neither efficient nor equitable. Let me use this opportunity to once again emphasize why every one of us must be involved in the discourse on restructuring. When I carry the gospel of restructuring Nigeria around, I don't carry it for mere political convenience. I am in this crusade for the purpose of making Nigeria work. And Africa, and indeed the world, needs a Nigeria that is working, while maintaining all the other niceties inherent in promoting the restructuring discourse in Nigeria today. I want to add that beyond the healthy competition among the federating units, which a restructured Nigeria would endanger, is the unique opportunity for the retooling of the leadership recruitment process in the country. Governance would be elevated to a serious business manned by equally serious-minded people. The attraction to power would no longer be a chance to stumble upon privileges not worked for, but a carefully calibrated move to demonstrate ingenuity and quality in creating wealth for the country. The restructured Nigeria that I talk about is a Nigeria that not only provides opportunities for everyone to work, but even more specifically challenges the leadership to demonstrate capacity to create wealth for every layer of governance. It is time for serious-minded people to get involved and take the lead in making our country work. Please do. It is time for citizens to demand, as a matter of right, from people aspiring to lead them, a plan on not just how to manage their wealth, but most fundamentally, how the wealth is going to be created. Slogans cannot take the place of plans, and propaganda is a poor substitute for a proper agenda. For long, our leadership has been pampered. We work into managing a wealth, we have little input into how it is created. And because we are not involved in the creation, we rarely appreciate it. Hence, we turn out either bad managers or killers of the greater Nigerian dream. For instance, I insist anybody who cannot tell Nigerians, you who are seated here today, at the state level or at the national level, she is going to generate required resources to run the state, she is aspiring to govern, is not worthy of the electoral votes. Nigeria needs a leadership that can create wealth for the country and make it work. Every part of Nigeria has enough wealth to sustain it. What is lacking is the leadership with the required capacity and vision to tap and manage the wealth on behalf of all. To me, any skeptic of restructuring Nigeria is submitting to the leadership indolence, which has denied the country its cherished position of leading Africa to greatness. Restructuring is not just about the devolution of powers to the states. It is about transforming the role of the federal government. In matters of territorial governance, the federal authorities must learn to cooperate with, and in some instances defer to, state authorities. In matters of economic governance, the federal authorities must learn to cooperate with rather than displace or ignore the private sector. If we want Nigeria to succeed, we must break with the misguided notion that the federal government or the president knows best and that no one else can be trusted. When I talk about restructuring, I am not talking about just constitutional tweaks. I am talking about cultural revolution as well. It is not about a reshuffling of few responsibilities or resources, but about disrupting the authoritarian politics our democracy has inherited from its military and colonial rulers. And there is nothing abstract about it. Just think about the Open Skies Agreement, Single African Air Transport Market, which African governments agreed in January, in which the Nigerian government underwrote without consulting our airline industry. You do not have to convince me that we must integrate African markets, that we need arrangements like the Open Skies Agreement. I am a believer already. But you will never convince me that a government can build an open market economy or transform trade relations if it refuses to cooperate with the private sector. It's not possible. We as a nation must rekindle the spirit of enterprise we experienced 2 decades ago when we prepared our return to democracy. We must rediscover the pragmatism that guided us through the difficult transition we were facing at the time. And we as leaders must recognize that this time we cannot do it alone. We must encourage cooperation, we must embrace openness, and we must rebuild trust with our people, but also with our international partners. These are some of the ways I believe Nigeria states can improve their capacity, increase their revenues, and better manage their local economies, which are critical to the safety, prosperity, and welfare of all Nigerians, and will allow my homeland to realize its true potential. Let me conclude with these words. Some Nigerian states are poor not because they are not receiving a fair share of oil money, but because they are not receiving a fair shot at true federalism. Only restructuring can correct that. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, I thank you all and God bless you. Thank you very much.
Excellency, thank you very much indeed. You were invited here this morning to talk about restructuring under the banner of Next Generation Nigeria, and you have certainly given us a lot to think about. We now have 25 minutes, and only 25 minutes, in which to put questions and points. I may be wrong, but I sense that there may be people with strong opinions sitting in the audience. I would welcome your questions. I would welcome your observations. I do not wish to take very long speeches from the floor because we don't have that much time. I wish to get as many people as possible into the discussion. Therefore, when you are handed the microphone, please say who you are, what your affiliation is, and make your point briefly. I'll start with the lady at the back, and then I will take the person over there and the person there.
Good morning. Thank you so much, sir, for your excellent articulation of the case for the restructuring of Nigeria. My name's Anulika Ajufo, and I'm Nigerian by birth. I work for the Open Society Foundations run by George Soros. So it was great to hear you speak about the restructuring. I would have loved to hear your views around specific areas, sectors such as education and healthcare, basic goods and services. Now, over 50% of the Nigerian population are under the age of 30. This puts an extreme strain on resources, and education is something that is paramount to taking us forward. The real resource that we have at 190 million people is the people. And so I would love to hear your views around what states should be doing and what your view is around empowering states to ensure that their youth are educated effectively.
Thank you very much. Can we move over here? Gentleman and then the lady in front. Please say who you are.
Yeah. Good morning, Your Excellency. My name is Godson Azu, the convener of London Political Summit here in London, and a political head of political desk, Ben Television here in London. Your Excellency, I so much admire your approach to the issue of restructuring. But my question goes, is restructuring to so many people means different things? But I want to ask you, sir, are your plans about restructuring Nigeria based on restructuring the geopolitical structure of Nigeria, or is it about restructuring the human beings? Is the human beings not the problem, rather than the political or geopolitical structure? Are you coming to restructure the people who play the politics in Nigeria, or you are coming to restructure the landmass of Nigeria?
Okay, thank you very much. Lady in front of you, please. Okay, shh, come on. Please give the lady respect, please.
Your Excellency, my name is Hawa Yusuf. I am representing Nigerian TV and radio here, Radio Nigeria. My question is, the typical Nigerian would want a social contract between ourselves and the leadership. So in your well-written script, I would have loved that you address that issue. Particularly, a typical Nigerian will want to open the tap and see water, wants to put on the light and see lights. If a Nigerian is ill, wants a hospital. I wonder why Nigerians come over here to get medical care. So that's why I believe there is no social contract between the citizenship and the leadership. Please, if you will address that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, basic services and geopolitical restructuring. Go for it.
Thank you. Can I answer from here?
Yeah, that's fine.
The lady who has, my views on education, healthcare, by either the federal government or the states. First of all, when we were in office, we enacted a law which made it compulsory for every level of government to educate every child up to secondary education, free of charge. But is that law being complied? No. Simply because the respective levels of government, whether local governments or states, are not investing enough in education. Now, how do we get them to invest in education? Again, I remember when I was vice president, and I commissioned the Ahmadu Bello University to find out how can the northern states improve their educational, level. By the time we got the recommendations and we had agreed on blueprints, we realized that all the northern states were not allocating the minimum amount of resources for education. And we directed that they should do so. But because there were no penalties, they could not. Now, as today, it is not the issue of even the northern states, it's the issue of the whole country. You must have been aware that we recorded the highest percentage of failures in the last university or West African school certificate examinations. 75% failure. Now, at the same time, you have almost 1.6 million Nigerians sitting for entrance examinations into universities. Out of that, only 600 places are available in Nigeria. So the rest find their ways, some to Ghana. And so. Today, Nigeria spends $1 billion in paying school fees to Ghana alone. $1 billion. So what should be done is to ensure that we invest appropriately to the minimum standard required by UNESCO as far as our education is concerned, as well as healthcare. We are not investing enough in all those areas. My views on restructuring, is it am I going to restructure zones or I'm going to restructure people? Is my views, most importantly, I think you must agree with my principle, first of all, that Nigeria needs to be restructured. How it is going to be restructured, of course, depends on the people of Nigeria. In other words, I have a very simple and straightforward attitude towards restructuring. If I have my way, today in Nigeria we have what we call exclusive legislative list of the federal government and concurrent. Concurrent, of course, means areas where both the federal government, the state government, and local governments have concurrent jurisdictions. I can sit down with the states as well as the leadership of the National Assembly and say, look, this concurrent list, together with all the budget allocations, let's move them all to the states and local governments. I don't have a problem with that. This is a very simple way of starting this. You move them. By the time you move them, you now come to the exclusive list. Okay, this is what requires constitutional amendment. How do we go about it? So we sit down and discuss.
And basic services? Entitlement to basic services?
Yeah, basic services, no, is it a social contract or basic?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, the social contract with Nigerians are at all levels. Of course, you will have a social contract. If you are running for the president, you know these are your areas where you need to have a social contract with Nigerians. Of course, why not? I don't have any objection. But then, who holds you accountable? At the end of the day, it is only the electorate that will hold you accountable. If you don't implement your social contract at the next election, they kick you out.
Thank you. It was the lady second from the back. We'll take the gentleman there and we'll take the lady on the front.
Hi, sorry, just bear with me. Hi, my name's Claire Milhench. I'm from Reuters. We're interested in whether you would run as an independent presidential candidate if you don't win the PDP candidacy ticket, and why? And how much of a threat do you see from a possible third party backed by former President Obasanjo?
Thank you very much. Gentleman there. Couldn't see that one coming, could we? Please.
Thank you very much. I'm Isia Kushito Al-Mustafa. I'm a doctoral researcher in Plymouth University, looking at maritime logistics, particularly port efficiency, crude oil export in Nigerian logistics systems. Thank you, Your Excellency, for the beautiful lecture. I have two questions in one, just brief. In 2016, the oil price was $28 per barrel, and Nigeria was actually bleeding to get funds for state resources management. If you were privileged then to be Nigerian president, assuming, what would you do differently from the current administration? Looking at perspective of foreign exchange rates, multiple exchange rates of dollar to a naira, and as we know all, that a strong economy is based on the exact or strong exchange rates. That's the question one. Second question. Sorry. Please.
Thank you very much.
Thank
the
you.
lady on the front, please. Sorry, Professor, you are far too profound for us. Carry on.
I'm Jenny Chico Okafor. I'm a lawyer, a social justice advocate, and women's rights advocate too. Thanks very much for your profound speech. I personally believe that the major issue facing Nigeria is lack of control and by people in leadership, and the fact that all of us are not working cohesively as one people. We work as tribes and people of various faiths. Do you think that your robust dream can be achieved, the dream of restructuring Nigeria can be achieved without total mindset reorientation of the average Nigerian, where we begin to operate as Nigerians, not Igbo, Hausa, Yoruba, Muslim, or Christian? And if you believe that, how do you think we can actualize that? Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much. Go for it. Excellency, go for it.
The next question was, will I run as an independent if I don't get a PDP ticket? Well, we wait until that time. The next is the issue of multiple exchange rates. We have only witnessed it in this administration. And if you listen to me in my speech, I dwelt on the issue of, multiple exchange rate. We must have a stable exchange rate that is predictable, that will also allow investors, to plan their investments in Nigeria over a long period of time. So certainly I'm not a supporter of multiple exchange rates. I am a supporter of a unified, exchange rate. Whether my dream of restructuring can be achieved, why not? It's doable. In fact, what I have told many Nigerians at home, I said, if you give me 6 months, I know I will be able to achieve, the first level of restructuring. In other words, the concurrent list issue. Very easy to deal with. I mean, because there is no state that you will call and say, look, I want to give you these responsibilities together with the resources that they will say no. I want the people of every state be able to hold their own leaders accountable, because at the moment, everything is being, the federal government is being accused of everything, even when it is not supposed to be its, its area of responsibility. So I want to be able to resolve that so that citizens can hold their local leaders responsible for lapses in maladministration at their respective levels of governance.
Okay, thank you very much. Gentleman in the hat there. There's the lady over there in the pink, and there's a gentleman right in the very back corner.
Excellency. My name is Benga Oduwai. I'm Chairman Rupert Investment Limited. Recently, a Nigerian leader described a lot of Nigerian youths as very lazy. The same Nigerian leader also described the role of women as being in the kitchen and in the other room. My question is, do you agree with that opinion? And if you do not, what role do you think the youth and the women of Nigeria will play in strengthening the economic management? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Lady here in pink.
Good morning, all protocols observed. I'm Princess Ogunwusi, a journalist from the Republic of Ireland. I just want to know, Your Excellency, how do you intend to engage Nigerians in diaspora towards accelerating the development of Nigeria? And would you be appointing a minister for diaspora? Thank you.
Thank you very much. And the gentleman right up in the back corner. Okay, well.
Good morning, and thank you for this opportunity.
Hold it right up to your mouth.
My name is Chisom J. Ezako. I'm a lecturer in business economics at London Churchill College and an independent economic consultant. There's a policy you suggested while you were talking. You said you gave in Lagos, which I love very much, about capital expenditure and recurrent expenditure. Because when we look at our budget, we spend a good percentage on recurrent expenditure, which is not good for the development of the economy. Now, you said something that when you say so, that the bureaucracy kicked against it. And if I will use the sayings by some people as an excuse for not doing what they're supposed to do, they say that when you fight corruption, corruption fights back as an excuse. When you have the opportunity and you want to implement this policy of increasing our capital expenditure, if this bureaucracy fights back, because definitely they will fight back, what strategy, because you said we shouldn't listen to slogans, we should ask our leaders about strategy and plans. What strategies, what plans will you use to fight this bureaucracy, given that some of them might be your friends, they might be your political associates, elites in the society? So how do you intend to make sure that this thing is properly done? Thank you.
Thank you very much. So, role of women and young people, diaspora, and strategies for dealing with corrupt kickbacks against innovation.
Thank you very much. Role of youth and women, whether I agree with... first of all, this question was asked 2 days ago at the BBC. First of all, on the issue of youth, I am an employer of labor, and most of that labor is youth-dominated. And I make, a lot of profits from my businesses. I don't agree with, the assertion that the youth are lazy or they are indolent. Certainly, I don't. But I am not surprised with the fellow who made that remarks, because he is never an employer of labor. He has no business. He has no educational institution, so he doesn't relate with youth in schools. So I don't blame that. Now, coming to the role of women, I was brought up by a woman. What I mean is that I lost my dad at a very, very early age, maybe less than 10. And my mother brought me up till I became what I am today. So that is why many years ago I established a microfinance bank. And I gave directive to the management of that microfinance bank that 80% of your loan should go to women. As a result of that, we have moved out 45,000 families out of poverty. If you want to fight poverty, empower a woman. And not only that, we have a recovery rate of 98% in our loans. If you give a woman 100 naira loan, she will go and invest it in the business and she will bring back the money. But if you give it to a man, of course, forget about it.
Don't go there. Don't go there. You just lost the next vote here.
Now, on the issue of Nigerians in diaspora, In fact, I was the one who introduced the diaspora issue in our administration, and I brought back so many of them to the country in our government, and engaged so many of them. So I believe I will continue with that policy, but most importantly is to make Nigeria attractive for Nigerians in diaspora to return home. That's the most important thing. If we can provide whatever you are getting in Europe or America or wherever you may be at home, you have no reason to be where you are today. You would rather be at home. On the issue of recurrent and capital expenditure, how would I will not tell you how I would deal with it, but let me get there. Allow me to get there or support me to get there and see whether I will deal with it or not.
Okay, there was a gentleman at the back, there in the middle. There was the lady at the front, and we will take one person from the gentleman over there in the middle. And I think that's going to be our last lot. Quick as you can, please.
Thank you, Baroness. Your Excellency, my name is Rodney. I work in the city. I'm a banker. My question is regarding what you talked about, privatization and particularly entities. I wanted to find out, in your perspective, have you earmarked any entities that are suitable for privatization going forward? Like, if you, of course, get the ticket.
Okay. I'm not sure whether that was a political question or a search for investment advice. Carry on.
All right, thank you very much, Your Excellency. I have a couple of questions, but most of them have been asked and you've answered them. Now, the last one here I've put it down is, when we talk about the Nigerian economy, we hardly talk about Nigeria engineering development. No country develops without homegrown engineering. Your Excellency, how can you restructure Nigerian engineering fits in our school education to help foster homegrown productions for the Nigeria economy?
Thank you very much. And the gentleman over there.
Thank you, Your Excellency. My name is John Gibb, and I have worked in Nigeria on and off over the past 30 years or so. So thank you very much for your presentation today and for the Q&A. But I do find that I've heard, a lot of what you said, the diagnosis we've heard before. I haven't really heard anything new as to how Nigeria is going to solve its problem. Yesterday on the radio, I hear Nigeria's population is now 200 million, and an earlier speaker said that 50% of that population is under the age of 30. So you have a very serious challenge there. And my one comment would be, until Nigeria gets serious, from the federal government down to the local government level, in organizing its domestic resource management much better and spending its own money on its own people, it's going to stay very much in the place it is now. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Excellent. So you want to deal with those last comments, please?
Yeah, can I have your attention, please? I think the next question was on the issue of privatization. What entities are left not privatized? I honestly would not tell you now because I have been out of office. All what I know is that since we have been out of office, the privatization exercise or scheme has not been faithfully implemented by the successive regime. So we virtually have like a stalemate in that sector of our economy. So we will look at it, what entities are left not privatized, and we will proceed to privatize them in very fast rate. On the issue of engineering sector, how to grow it, is an educational curriculum. Again, when we get there, we will see how we can improve on our current, level. What I know is that there are quite a number of deficiencies in our educational curriculum, and I remember a few months ago when I was at the Oxford University as a fellow of St. Anthony's College, I met with the Minister of Education and pointed out to him that for several years now, the teaching of history in Nigeria, or Nigerian history, has been discontinued. And I think it is a very grave situation, and I told the minister, and happily, when he went back, I think he made a case for the reintroduction of teaching of Nigerian history in our Nigerian schools. So we will look at it on the issue of engineering and see how far we are faring and bring it up to date. I agree with the last speaker on the issue of population growth is one of, I think, one of the most explosive, issues that we have to deal with. Population growth and population control is a very sensitive issue in Nigeria, both faiths, Christians and Muslims. So we'll see how we will.
Thank you very much indeed, Excellency. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Once again, you have proved that discussions about Nigeria are never, ever dull. Thank you very much for all of your questions. Good luck. Thank you.
Thank you.